Spirit of Christmas. Love, Leigh. Hope for the Holidays series, Book 1. Written by Michele Pollock Dalton. Narrated by Rick Barr. Chapter 1. A scarlet river flowed from Leigh's temple, a wound near her hairline buried in the bruising impression left by the bedroom door frame. When David shoved her again, Leigh tripped over a tear in the ancient carpet and fell to her knees. She knew better than to be caught unaware when David's temper flared, but the unprovoked attack came out of the blue. Thankful that her daughter, Noelle, was still safely asleep in the next room, Leigh staggered to her feet and tried to escape the furious man's angry onslaught. "Can't you do something as simple as keep a roll of toilet paper in the house, stupid?" David shouted as he kicked the flimsy bedroom door closed. Leigh circled to the far side of the unmade bed. When she'd been rudely yanked from the lumpy mattress and the safe cocoon of sleep, Leigh hadn't realized the immediate danger. While David's moods tended to fluctuate swiftly, the prolonged isolation during lockdown only exacerbated the man's volatility. "I'm sorry," she mumbled before she pressed the back of her hand to swollen lips. "The store shelves have been bare for weeks." "That's ridiculous," David howled, salting his wild exclamation with expletives. "A man can't even take a dump without you screwing it up. You're worthless, Leigh." "I explained earlier why I left clean washcloths next to the sink. Weren't you listening?" Leigh warily retorted. "Listen? You and the kid never shut up. I'm going out of my mind stuck in this house with her whining and your ridiculous, silly songs. Can't you just keep the snotty little brat quiet for once?" "David, Noelle isn't feeling good. What if it's the virus?" "Will you stop with the hysterics? I can't take it anymore," David roared. Then he picked up the sterling silver picture frame that held their wedding picture and pitched it at Leigh's head. Leigh ducked as the heavy object sailed past, and she gasped as the sound of shattering glass exploded right behind her. "Have you lost your mind?" she choked out as the bitter March wind whipped into the room. "What did you say to me?" David growled, stomping to within an inch of Leigh's trembling form. When David lunged, then threw Leigh into the nearby wall, the terrified woman could only blink in shock. What was happening to her carefully crafted life? "Mama," 4-year-old Noelle Piper whimpered. "Mama, I'm scared." The hand that covered Leigh's mouth did little to stop the flood of blood and tears that dripped down her chin, and the ragged edges of 2 broken teeth cut deep into the swollen flesh. So when she tried to whisper comfort to her daughter, the sound literally burbled. "Shh, Elle, Daddy's mad." Cornflower blue eyes rounded with fear, and the tiny girl shrank into her mother's side. Droplets formed on the inky black lashes as the little body began to quake. Educated by a heavy hand, the terror cultivated during the previous 6 months of Noelle's life silenced her in an instant. She didn't want to pay the piper again. There were still mottled marks around her neck where Daddy throttled her the last time he wanted quiet. Cautiously, the pair moved down the short hallway from the kitchen to the bathroom. Once they were safely locked inside, Leigh mopped up her face and pressed a cold cloth against the most recent damage. The compact, olive-green bathtub was a strange symbol of security. Its scarred depths regularly welcomed the frightened duo and offered them a temporary shelter, cuddled together behind the only locked door available. "Get out of there! You're not the only ones who need to use the toilet!" David hotly demanded as he rattled the flimsy door. "I'm sick and tired of begging to use that thing," he railed, landing a solid kick at the base of the obstacle. Profanity peppered the air, and the volume of David's complaints against his family echoed into the night air through the open windows. Hurriedly, Leigh pulled Noelle from the tub. She couldn't risk the possibility of another police report by the frazzled neighbors. "Just a minute," she stalled. When the door finally opened, David forcefully shoved Leigh aside and slammed the door. Leigh rebounded off the wall and felt something give way in her wrist, but her daughter's shriek of pain drowned out all else.
"Open the door!" she yelled. "You caught Elle's hand!"
"Little brat's gonna have to wait. I'm taking a dump," the surly beast roared.
"David, you've shut her hand in the door. Just reach over and unlock it,"
Leigh pleaded, huddling around her daughter's small frame.
"It'll be okay, baby. Mama promises. It'll be okay,"
she frantically consoled as they waited. And waited. Chapter 2. Leigh carefully wrapped the vividly bruised fingers of her daughter's hand as tears choked her. She'd hoped that David's return to work earlier in the summer would mitigate some of his rage. However, the pressure of being the only breadwinner built colossal walls of tension. Instead of getting better, the aggression became progressively worse. "Would you stop that sniveling?" David cursed. "What do I need to do to make you two shut up for once?" Attempting to control her own emotions was difficult, but requesting the injured child to do the same? Impossible, Leigh thought. Noelle needed medical attention. Several fingers appeared broken, and the ravaged flesh was laid open. Yet their conditions were so conspicuous that Leigh couldn't gamble on a trip to the emergency room, not without the risk of human services swooping in to steal her daughter. "You're going to pay the piper if you don't quit with that racket," David ominously advised as he stampeded into the kitchen. "So either shut her up, Leigh, or I'll do it for you." Frustrated by their obvious lack of respect for his downtime, David yanked his wife to her feet. "She'll never settle down unless you stop babying her. Now put her to bed. I want some time with you." Cringing, Leigh quickly escorted her daughter out of range and gulped back her aversion to David's suggestion. Their time together had become more of a wrestling match of late, and the resultant lack of reciprocity often added teeth marks and bruises to her sensitive areas. As she sat on the floor by Noelle's toddler bed a short while later, Leigh stroked her baby girl's face and temple.
"Shh, sweetie. Mama's here." "Make it better?"
the child blubbered. Heartsick, Leigh wanted nothing more. But how? As a child, she'd aged out of the foster care system without anyone to call her own. The few acquaintances Leigh could count as friends were harassed by their own troubles in life. The only family she had shared the same 1970s trailer she called home. All other considerations aside, what possible options were even available? Leigh's unemployment income was tied to a joint checking account, an account David removed her name from when the pandemic hit and she lost her job. His words? "You don't earn the money, you don't spend the money." Aside from the spare change in Noelle's piggy bank, Leigh had access to exactly nothing. Even her late 90s sedan was registered in David's name, and it barely made it from one block to the next without stalling out at stoplights. At one point, shortly after Noelle's birth, Leigh considered divorce. While present since adolescence, David's mental health issues were well controlled for the first few years of their marriage. To such an extent, Leigh was unaware of the issue. However, the added pressure of parenthood eroded whatever stability the man could claim. Unpredictability kept David a hair's breadth away from socially unacceptable behavior most of the time, but the capriciousness of a worldwide lockdown loosed whatever control he'd previously possessed. "Leave that kid alone and get in here," David howled from their bedroom. Leigh ached. Everywhere. In body and in spirit. David's rough possession and rage at her lack of response evicted whatever bit of fondness Leigh carried for the man. The choice was made. There simply was no other alternative if Leigh wished to survive. If she wanted Noelle to survive. She waited until the buzzsaw of David's snore indicated he was soundly asleep. Then Leigh crept from the room. In the bathroom, she quickly grabbed her robe off the hook. It barely covered her nakedness, but fear of discovery lodged in Leigh's throat. Noelle's whimpers of pain had sounded through the thin walls during the duration of Leigh's ordeal, and the frantic mother hurried to collect the child from her bed, before the noise woke the slumbering beast. And then they were gone. Chapter 3. That's another one, Paul Whitaker grumbled as the flatbed truck pulled in and slowly lowered the large yard shed into place. Third one this month, he explained to his wife.
We're running out of room,
Mary pointed out, extending her hand toward the section of flat land near her husband's workshop. In the hilly area outside of Hope Springs, Tennessee, level ground was at a premium.
Does Peter have any more room at his place?
Nope. He's got a trailer load of unclaimed freight parked in his yard.
Oh, no. The Creature Comforts order?
Mary questioned.
He's been working on that furniture for months.
Yep, Paul acknowledged with a brief nod. Guess those folks decided against opening their bar after all. Can't blame them. What business is going to make it at 25% capacity? Mary's hand settled on her bosom in a gesture of dismay.
Peter's got a lot of money tied up in that order. Who's going to want 20-some-odd sets of custom-made tables and stools?
Interrupted by a call, Mary wandered away while Paul greeted the truck driver. Thanks for picking it up. The folks on the other end give you any trouble? Nah, the burly trucker answered. Got the signed-off repo papers here for you. He grunted before spitting a stream of tobacco off to the side. Looks like the fella you leased it to did some improvements. He was using it as a hunting cabin. Paul nodded and handed over the driver's fees. Thanks for your help, Bert. Might have another run for you next week if I can square away a sale on one of the repossessed sheds. Sounds good, the genial fellow acknowledged with a backward wave.
I'm running into town,
Mary called to Peter as she rushed away as well.
Got some folks waiting at the church who need some things from the compassion closet.
Her pet project was overrun with requests for help from families all over the area. But lean times made Mary's job more problematic. Donations were down, and the needs skyrocketed exponentially each month. But their pastor insisted he had a special case on his hands. So off Mary went, doing a mental tally of what remained in the closet. The main street of Hope Springs stretched several blocks along a state highway and served as a small crossroads for traffic coming down out of the Cumberland Plateau's higher elevations. 3 churches, 2 cafes, a tiny grocery store connected to the service station, and several family-owned businesses dotted the 2 main thoroughfares. So there wasn't much to see. Still, the humble community was a busy hub of local commerce. At the Baptist church on the southern edge of town, Mary pulled in and found a rusted-out baby blue sedan waiting. Approaching the vehicle, Mary called a greeting to the occupants and stifled her gasp at their appearances.
Well, darling, it looks like we should take a poke through the clothes bins I got in the back.
Thankful for the quaint yard barn her husband donated for storage, Mary led the woman and her daughter inside.
My daughter-in-law, Stacy, is about your size, she offered with a smile. Girl loves to shop, but she's always generous with her donations when she cleans out her closet. By the way, I'm Mary Whitaker.
Leigh made a subtle nod of greeting with her aching head, but kept her eyes down. The damage to her face startled people, but her lack of clothing made mouths drop open. Shame suffused her cheeks, and tears pressed against the back of her eyelids. It was still incomprehensible to Leigh how she'd come to such a place. Yet there she was, in an unfamiliar town, begging from strangers. With Noelle cradled in her arms, Leigh staggered her way through the stacked piles of plastic totes and corrugated boxes. Quietly, she shyly introduced herself to the candid woman. Sporadic conversation, occasionally interrupted by the child's hoarse whimpers, helped Mary select a change of clothes for each member of the leery little family.
Seems like you folks could use a good meal and a little looking after,
Mary suggested as she bundled up the clothing.
We don't have a medical office in town, but I got a friend who works on the back of a county ambulance. Tess could likely patch you up.
Leigh vehemently shook her head and struggled to maintain her composure.
No, thank you, she managed to mumble through chattering teeth. Darling, there's no one around here going to hurt you, Mary cajoled. I'm not letting anyone take my baby, Leigh fiercely declared.
Course not, Mary agreed. Chapter 4.
Well, now what?
Tess Alexander whispered to Mary,
I patched them both up the best I could, but acetaminophen isn't going to do much to help the little one. I splinted the 3 broken fingers, and I've got Steri-strips on the worst of the cuts, but her mother refuses any further medical attention."
Paul rubbed at the back of his neck in consternation. "That just ain't right," he grumbled.
"She's scared," Mary hushed, "and rightly so, I guess."
Tess finished packing the emergency bag and shrugged.
"I've got to run, but I'll stop back if they need anything else."
Huffing out an aggravated breath, Paul shot a glance at his wife. After almost 40 years with the woman, he knew what came next. "No."
"Their car ran out of gas before we could make it out of town, Paul. What am I supposed to do? Drop 'em back off and wish them the best of luck?"
"Woman, these folks ain't our responsibility," Paul gently chided. "Now give 'em a little something from your compassion closet and send 'em on their way."
"That's just it," Mary gently explained. "There's nothing left in my fund. I've got clothes and canned goods, but all the financial resources dried up months ago."
A groan escaped, and his wife's side-eye warned Paul he'd be sleeping in the guest room if a compromise couldn't be found. "You know we're hard-pressed as it is, Mary Belle. I cashed out the last of the CDs to get Peter through until he can move that load of furniture," he reminded. "I've got someone in Monteagle that might be interested in that 16x40 lofted shed, but that money's got to last."
"Paul Casper Whitaker, are you suggesting I leave those poor souls on the side of the road? Where's your Christian charity?"
"I ain't letting strangers stay in this house. Not after last time," Paul retorted under his breath. "You want to keep 'em? They can stay in one of the buildings I got sitting on the lot, but I don't want to wake up with our wallets and car keys gone tomorrow morning." Mary did a little victory dance.
"I'll get 'em some blankets and a flashlight. Make things real cozy for 'em."
Paul stuffed his hands in his pockets and grunted. "Guess they can stay in the one that came back today. It's a little nicer than the others." While the days still carried a bit of summer warmth, the evenings began to grow chill as September came to an end. Still, beggars couldn't be choosers, and Leigh was supremely thankful for the well-built storage shed. Insulated walls covered in rough plywood made the rustic accommodations suitable for habitation, and a secure door, complete with a lock, gave Leigh a sense of security. Mary dropped a pile of blankets and pillows on the yard barn's unfinished floor and pointed to the ladder that led to the loft.
"Oh, look! Won't that be a cozy place to sleep?"
Tugging at the waistband of borrowed jeans 3 sizes too big and as many inches too short, Leigh shrugged. The stylish blouse she wore hung off one shoulder, then pulled tightly across her breast. Still, Leigh was thankful to be covered. The thigh-length robe she left home in was tucked securely in a paper bag along with Noelle's pajamas.
"Thank you for letting us stay,"
Leigh said again, her gratitude profuse.
"You're very welcome, darling. It might not be much, but it'll do in a pinch. We ain't got much to share but the good news these days," Mary explained. "But I can make sure you've got something to keep your belly full."
After a last, grim look around, Mary handed over the flashlight and wished her guest a good night. As soon as they were finally alone, Leigh burst into tears. What was she going to do? Chapter 5. "Look what I found," Mary enthused when she arrived the next morning. A paper bag held peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, along with several juice boxes and bottles of water. But the unexpected treasure was a little something she'd unearthed from the household items her daughter-in-law, Stacy, recently donated. Awkwardly, the rolled-up area rug thumped to the floor when Mary sat it down.
"I thought if we did a little cleaning later, then we could put the carpet down. That way, the little miss will have a safe place to play without worrying about splinters."
Taken aback, Leigh tipped her head in confusion.
"Don't you, want us to leave today?" "Of course not, darling. You and that precious little miss can stay as long as you need. There's not much reason to rush off, is there?"
Leigh glumly shook her head and shuddered at the thought.
Do you mind if we use your bathroom then? I took Elle outside a little earlier, but she was too afraid to potty in the woods. Oh, well, glory be. Of course not. You come on up to the house right this minute. As they crossed the yard to the low-slung ranch-style house, a county police cruiser pulled into the driveway, and an ominous dread settled low in Leigh's stomach. Quickly, she pushed Noelle behind her and stood stock still as the sheriff's deputy approached. "Ma'am, you're going to have to come with me," Officer Jenkins explained. "We found the stolen vehicle you abandoned in town." "Stolen?" Mary and Leigh parroted in unison. Leigh shook her head. "That's my car. It might be in my husband's name, but I paid for it. Just check the glove box. The purchase contract has my name on it." The deputy shifted when he got a better look at the woman's face and noticed the arm she cradled near her midsection. When the blonde pixie peeked out from behind her mother, Luke Jenkins sighed. Domestics were always the most challenging calls to handle, and it took up about 75% of his time these days. "Busting up family quarrels is turning into a full-time job," he grumbled under his breath. "Sorry, ma'am. You'll still need to come with me until we figure this out," Luke apologized. "Well, at least give him a minute to use the facilities before you slap the cuffs on," Mary demanded, the motherly tone brooking no argument. Blanching, Leigh cradled her bandaged wrist tightly. The damaged appendage was easily twice its normal size and nearly black from the bruising. "Cuffs?" she hoarsely whispered. "I'll call the impound yard and have them pull the paperwork you mentioned. If your story lines up, we can do this without restraints," Luke appeased. "But I'm still going to read you your rights, ma'am." As the younger man did just that, Leigh swayed into Mary's side and burst into tears. Noelle's panic over her mother's distress elicited wails, and poor Mary Whitaker had her hands full with two sobbing strangers when her husband popped his head out the back door. "What in tarnation's going on here?" Paul blustered, taking in the chaotic scene. The 20-minute drive in the back of the police cruiser shattered the last of Leigh's fortitude. Silent tears streamed down her face. The Whitakers graciously offered to tag along behind with Noelle in tow, and that gave Leigh equal parts comfort and concern. Who would take care of her daughter if the sheriff sided with David's accusations? After years in foster care, Leigh knew there were good families out there, but that wasn't always true. And the thought of Noelle returned to her father's care made a hot flood of bile surge up Leigh's throat. "I think I'm going to be sick," she gasped at the deputy. Chapter 6. "I'm redecorating," Stacy explained as she pulled box after box from the back of her luxury SUV. "So if your new tenant can use any of this stuff, she's welcome to it." Mary turned a confused gaze on her daughter-in-law. "Didn't you just buy all this when you and Peter separated?" Stacy shrugged and continued to yank things out of the vehicle. "The townhouse is too small for all this. It feels cluttered. Besides, it's for a good cause, right?" "Well, yes, of course. These poor folks left home in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And that husband? Ooh-wee! What a pistol! He accused the poor woman of stealing her own car just to cause more trouble." Although her ex-husband, Peter, never laid a hand on her, Stacy still felt a strange camaraderie with the woman living in the storage shed. "I found a few things on clearance in the toy aisle," she explained as Stacy handed over the last 2 bags of stuff. "Thought the little girl might need a few things to keep her busy." Mary pulled her daughter-in-law in and hugged the woman. Although Stacy often seemed driven and unapproachable, Mary spent the last decade getting to know her. Underneath that unflappable exterior was an indulgent heart. "You take care of yourself, darling, and don't be a stranger. Paul and I still consider you family." With a brisk nod, Stacy acknowledged the connection. Peter's folks were good people, and she'd miss them.
After puttering around in the rental for the better part of the afternoon, Mary felt marginally better about leaving the little family there for the night. Stacy's unexpected donation of linens and household goods added a bit of coziness to an otherwise austere shelter. However, fear of discovery still hung heavily over Leigh as she shut off the flashlight and settled into the makeshift pallet of blankets that evening. With help from the sheriff, Leigh filed assault charges against David the day prior, and the stolen vehicle returned to Leigh's possession. A call to legal aid also provided Leigh with the necessary paperwork to initiate a divorce. With a sense of relief, the injured duo visited the local medical clinic, where Noelle received proper care. Although Human Services received notification, the social worker assured Leigh that Noelle would be allowed to stay with her mother as they transitioned to a safer home environment. But Leigh's relief still paled in the dire face of her dread. David might be on the other side of the state, Noelle might be safely asleep beside her, and the lock on the door might be a blessed bit of security. But anxiety still nested in her stomach. A lurking panic still stalked Leigh on stealthy feet. Would she ever truly feel safe again? Toxic shame clouded Leigh's mind. How had she come to such a place? Worthless and worn, her blue eyes blurred and burned as liquid grief spilled from under closed lids. "Why?" she whispered into the darkness. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Leigh grieved. Only a broken heart is big enough to receive God, her first foster mother told her the day she entered care 20 years earlier, and Leigh was suddenly reminded of that sentiment. After a decade of parental neglect and abuse, Leigh had fallen asleep in the safety of her foster mother's arms on that long-ago night, a peaceful first glimpse of security. "Where are you now, God? Can you see me? Where are you?" the stricken woman struggled to say. "Am I broken enough yet?"
Chapter 7.
"I don't know what to do for that poor girl," Mary confessed to her husband as they readied for bed.
"Not much we can do," the pragmatic fellow sighed, disgusted by his lack of funds. That's how he'd supported his wife's spirit of charity in the past. This hands-on approach was out of Paul's comfort zone, especially when it came to a battered woman. He'd watched his own mama suffer under Papa's heavy hand, but she'd been a faithful Christian wife, determined to honor her marriage vow without exception. Yet Paul couldn't reconcile how a loving God could condone such things. "Maribel?"
"Uh-huh."
"I've been good to you, right? I always done what I could to be the right kind of man for you, and I ain't never struck you. But I've been spitting mad a time or two, and it just occurred to me. What would you have done? Would you have stayed no matter what?" After a lengthy consideration, Mary softly replied,
"There isn't an easy answer for that. Some women have no choice but to stay. Our girl outside? Sounds like she was pretty isolated. No friends or family to turn to for help."
They finished their nighttime routine and crawled into bed before Mary continued.
"When I took my vow to love, honor, and obey you, I made that promise before God Almighty. But for some unfortunate souls, that vow comes with a heavy price tag."
The next morning, as Mary posed the same questions to the pastor's wife, she was surprised by the elderly woman's response.
"For women with strong faith that promise before God, the one that requires them to stay until death do us part? Well, I suspect it creates a much greater vulnerability when they're abused. I've run into more than a few ladies that feel like they're not allowed to leave. They believe marriage is forever, regardless of how cruel their husbands treat them. Even if their lives are in danger, they stay." "Just doesn't seem right," Mary thoughtfully commented. "Sure doesn't seem like a loving God would tolerate such nonsense."
Abigail Berger agreed.
"Pastor and I have come to loggerheads over this a time or two in our 50 years together. And what we've concluded, after some mighty deep studies and soul-searching, is this. A justified divorce withdraws marriage privileges from someone who breaks the marriage covenant through adultery, abuse, abandonment, or harmful neglect. The good father
won't ever forsake folks to a situation that makes a mockery of what is sacred."
That answer resonated with Mary.
"God is a deliverer, ain't he? He'll make a way for the little miss and her mama. I'm sure of it." "And so am I,"
Abigail agreed.
"We'll take those spiritual needs up with God, and while he gets to working, we'll do the same. Now you tell me what those hurtin' folks need, and I'll put the word out."
A crisp October breeze rustled the leaves overhead as Paul left his workshop. He was a simple man with calluses on his hands and not much in the way of learning. But Paul knew his place in the world. He was a craftsman, with a talent born from years of practice. So when he knocked on the door to the occupied shed, Paul had a sensible plan. "Mind letting me take a look around, Mrs. Piper? I got some ideas for this place that should make it more, like a cabin of sorts." Leigh shrugged and let the older man into the yard barn. It was his place. What was she supposed to say? No? Noelle ducked behind her mother and held her new dolly tightly. With all the sudden changes and palatable tension, the little girl refused to be separated from her mother except by force. Under the bleak, uneasy gaze of the wounded woman and skittish child, Paul took some measurements. While most of his outdoor buildings worked off variations of the same floor plans and sizes, the rough modifications the customer made after delivery added new dimensions to the interior of the shed. "Think I got all I need," he hastily advised when finished. Anxious to be away from the distrustful glances, Paul felt a check in his spirit. Trust needed to start somewhere. I'm thinking we can build a platform bed here at the back, and I'll put some big drawers underneath for storage. That should give you some place more comfortable to sleep, right?" Leigh blinked.
What?"
"Sure, and I looked into an incinerating toilet. No plumbing needed. I'll just close in a small space next to the bunk for a privy," the man explained, excitement warming his tone. "My boy said he'd pull some odds and ends together to build some cabinets for under that front window. Won't have running water, but it should suffice in a pinch." Startled, Leigh gaped.
I can't pay for any of that. The unemployment office is transferring my benefits, but it might take a while before I have any money, and I won't qualify for any public assistance until I've been in the county 30 days.
Paul waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't worry about that, Mrs. Piper. Peter and I got leftover scrap wood we can use. Only expense is going to be the toilet. They don't come cheap, but we'll get a start and wait on the Almighty for the rest." Chapter 8. Woken from a nightmare, Leigh shakily climbed off the floor and stumbled toward the door. The man on the other side of the inset window was not familiar to her, and Leigh's heart drummed a thunderous beat. Her skin went clammy, and the frightened woman pressed her damaged wrist against the riot of nausea that turned her stomach. There was nowhere to hide. Although a locked door stood between them, Leigh couldn't catch her breath. "You okay?" Peter Whitaker loudly called as the bruised woman's face went ashen under the garish marks. "Hey, do I need to call for help?" he shouted as he rattled the knob.
"Go away!"
Leigh frantically demanded. Peter turned and hurried back toward his parents' house. When his pops called and asked for help with a project, Peter was relieved. His business's imminent demise meant a dearth of productivity, which rankled Peter's energetic disposition. However, he wasn't prepared to deal with another woman's hysterics. That ship had long sailed. "Ma! Hey, Ma! Where'd you go?" he hollered as he bounded up the back porch steps. The screen door thunked behind him as Peter strode into the house. "Mother?" "Up here. Settle down," Mary responded as she descended the stepladder. "What in the heck are you doing up there?" Peter questioned as he entered the kitchen and relieved his mother of the broom. "Dang spiders are taking up residence in the corners," Mary chuffed. "Soon as the weather starts to turn,
I end up with a bunch of gangly squatters all over the house. Speaking of squatters, what's up with the woman hanging out in Pop's shed? She about fainted away when I knocked on the door. Oh, dear, Mary groaned as she quickly stripped off her apron. She's mighty protective of that little miss, and she's got every right to be skittish. But let's go see if we can get her settled down. Mary went first as they climbed onto the narrow porch that led to the door. Yoo-hoo! Anyone home? She cheerfully called. I brought my boy by to meet you. Suspicion lurking in her eyes, Leigh met the Whitakers on the tiny porch and closed the front door behind her. Elle is taking her afternoon nap, she softly advised, eyes on her bare toes. As of yet, all she had was a pair of flip-flops, and the incongruity of the hand-me-down outfit added another layer of mortification to her already pulverized self-esteem. Peter surveyed the woman's bowed head and shoved a hand through his sandy blonde hair. A spate of curls near his nape suggested he was overdue for a haircut. But what did it matter? Then the woman's graphic print blouse caught his attention. Where'd that come from? He wondered out loud, recognizing his ex-wife's wardrobe. Stacy's been decluttering, Mary related when she noticed Peter's eyebrows draw together in consternation. She pulled some things together for the Pipers. Please tell your wife, thank you, Leigh quietly related. Elle loves the doll stuff and puzzles she provided. Ex-wife, Peter grunted, unsure why it would matter to the timid lady. All righty then, everyone's introduced, Mary cheerfully commented, sidestepping Peter's abrupt announcement. That's out of the way, so let's get to work. Darling, I don't know what's gone on behind closed doors, but God knows. He's seen what you and the little miss have been through. He knows the truth. And his heart broke when you were so badly mistreated. Mary softly consoled that evening as she gathered bath necessities for her guests. And I can promise you, he's the only fella that will never let you down. Leigh offered her hostess a weak smile. You sound like one of my foster mothers, she admitted. That lady acted like she knew God personally, talked to him constantly, made him feel, I don't know, real to me somehow, Leigh reminisced. Well, young lady, he is real, very real, and he's got a standing promise in place that says he's going to bless you. You just keep believing that, and you'll see the goodness of God for yourself, Mary encouraged. So don't be troubled, and don't be afraid. As she bathed Noelle, Leigh considered the well-intentioned advice. Easy for her to say, she breathed in an undertone. There was something inside her crushed spirit that wanted to believe such things were possible. Yet, if all the things Mary said were true, then where was this great and mighty God when she was repeatedly molested and brutalized? How could she trust anyone or anything when Leigh couldn't even trust herself? Chapter 9. The shades of autumn covered the Appalachians with a riot of color, and as Leigh walked through the twilight with Noelle at her side, an unexpected sense of peace touched her soul. Oh! She gasped in fright when a shadow separated from the path in front of them. Easy there, Peter pacified. Ma sent me looking for you. Dinner's ready. The surge of adrenaline left Leigh weak with fear as the reserved man explained his presence. In the weeks since Paul and Peter started work inside the yard barn, Leigh gradually relaxed her vigilance around them by incremental degrees. Still, all it took was one surprise encounter to undo all that hard-won peace of mind. As Peter escorted the quiet pair through the encroaching darkness, he was compelled to speak. His overactive mind always sought ways to encourage, and in the case of Leigh and her daughter, the compulsion was even more potent than usual. You do a great job with her, he complimented. Startled, Leigh brought her gaze up. Pop and I heard her singing today while you and Ma were doing the wash. I think that's the first time I ever heard her voice.
he explained, and aimed a boyish grin at the little girl. A soft smile touched Leigh's face.
Elle loves to sing to her baby doll, don't you, sweetie? That's what mamas do, the blonde pixie quietly agreed. They sing their little girls to sleep.
Peter chuckled at the matter-of-fact explanation.
So what did daddies do? He lightly teased.
Then the world went utterly still. Stricken glances and Elle's tear-glazed eyes slapped at Peter. What a stupid thing to say, he silently berated himself.
You gotta pay the piper,
Elle fearfully recited by rote. The man's quizzical expression prompted Leigh's strangled explanation.
David thought it was an ingenious play on our surname.
Startled by the ominous implications, Peter's breath hissed out. Tongue-tied, he was stumped into silence. What platitude could possibly erase the apprehension of the cowed little girl or her mother? Sick unease turned Leigh's stomach. Revulsion marked the man's face, and Leigh shriveled in shame under his incredulous gaze. With the last shred of her dignity in tatters, Leigh wordlessly turned and led Noelle back to the refurbished shed.
Hey,
Peter grunted after the retreating pair.
What about dinner?
The click of the door's locking mechanism echoed in his ears, and as the small beam of the flashlight flickered to life inside the small dwelling, Peter choked on a bitter mouthful of regret. Inside, Leigh led Noelle past the banked mountain of construction debris to the newly finished platform bed. The Whitaker men's efforts showed progress in every corner of the small space. From the tiny bank of cupboards built into the alcove at the front of the building to the safety railing added at the edge of the loft overhead. Even the itty-bitty privy was closed in and ready for the special toilet that was on order. The care of the Whitaker family and a handful of community members shocked Leigh on a daily basis. Aside from that very first journey into the foster care system, Leigh had no frame of reference for that type of compassion, and it all seemed tied to an elusive thing called faith. After Noelle settled into an uneasy slumber, Leigh pulled an unopened letter from the pocket of her jeans. On a recent trip into Hope Springs, Mary introduced Leigh to the pastor's wife, and when the elderly lady wrapped plump arms around her, Leigh felt a fleeting sense of belonging. With the flashlight wedged under her armpit, Leigh tore open the envelope and sighed as she tried to make out the flowing script.
Well, my dear, you have made quite the impression on our little congregation. Your bravery inspires us all, but I doubt you will believe that. Being a victim of domestic abuse does not define you, Leigh. God does. He loves you in an all-encompassing manner. You are cherished and adored. You are beyond precious to him, and he says you have a hope and a future, one that demonstrates his goodness. No one ever deserves to be derided, damaged, or dehumanized, and let me assure you, it certainly is not a part of God's design. Flawed humanity destroyed what God created to be the most wonderful expression of his love in this world, the bond between man and wife. But that's not the end of it, my dear. I promise you this. God can and will help you develop new dreams for a future free from the mistreatment you've endured. Don't be discouraged. Trust the path he's forged to bring you into a new season of life. Cling to hope. Use it to fight your fear, anxiety, and depression, Leigh. God's unfailing love will see you and Noelle through this time of change, and so will we. Abigail.
Leigh refolded the lilac-scented stationery with trembling hands. How could the sense of betrayal and humiliation ever be washed away? The marks left by David's heavy hands may have faded from her physical body, but their impressions still marked her battered soul. Her worthless, battered soul. Chapter 10.
Holy smokes!
Leigh panted as she bent at the waist to catch her breath. An odd donation of reclaimed wood and stone for the shed's transition into a rustic cabin sounded like a wonderful blessing, At least until Leigh realized she'd be the one required to do the reclamation. The old barn looked like a stiff wind would topple it at any second, but the structure was stubbornly tenacious despite its fragile appearance. Pulling it apart piece by piece required a full week's work. Then came the wicked task of eliminating decades of grime and layers of paint from the weathered boards. However, the payoff was immense. The lightly whitewashed boards added brightness to the otherwise dingy interior of the converted yard barn. Offset in places by drywall painted an icy shade of pale blue, the overall effect made the storage unit look like a true home. Peter patted Leigh on the back in a friendly gesture and handed over the water bottle. "Don't give up on me now," he lightly teased. "We still have the loft area to finish for a certain little miss." Hearing the pet name, Noelle perked up from her spot in the middle of the platform bed. The space at the top of the ladder was a cozy, hidden alcove that provided a wonderful sense of security to the little girl. With its slanted ceiling and strange little nooks under the eaves, her future bedroom left Noelle utterly enchanted. As the weeks wore on, Leigh's stiff posture and rigid vigilance gradually relaxed. The Whitakers' friendly acceptance soothed the shattered woman's need for emotional distance. While Mary's motherly care was a balm, Peter's quiet encouragement and easy humor built Leigh's fragile trust in minute increments. Those tiny, often imperceptible gains softened a fearful tension in Leigh's face and form. By proxy, Noelle also relaxed her guard, and the little girl's smile made rare appearances as she helped her mother throughout the day. As the last of the construction clutter disappeared out the door later that evening, Leigh heaved a sigh of relief. Exhaustion took a back seat to her need for a tidy living space, so Leigh hummed in satisfaction as she wiped down the salvaged barn wood floor. "Well, I'll be!" Mary exclaimed when she showed up with a basket of sandwiches and cold drinks. "It's really starting to look like a home in here." Leigh nodded her weary head. The craftsmanship of the Whitaker men was a wonder. Built-ins tucked in here and there added plenty of storage, and the possibility of adding propane lights, heat, and refrigeration gave the old shed new life. But it was up to Leigh to do the rest, and that would require money. With a flourish, Mary chose that moment to extend a few envelopes toward Leigh. "I think there might be a blessing in there," she grinned. "Something you've been waiting for?" Was it really that simple? Breathe a prayer one minute and find an answer the next? Leigh pawed through the letters in anticipation, and there it was, the envelope that contained her entire future. Ripping into the paper, she victoriously withdrew the check from her back payments from the unemployment office. "Thank you, God," she whispered in gratitude. The money wouldn't last long, but at least she'd have a little something to depend on each week. A peaceful smile settled over Mary's face. "Right on time, I'd say," she enthused. "And if you do a little thinking, darling, I'm guessing you'll figure a trip to the public assistance office is due." Startled, Leigh looked up. Had it been that long already? She could vividly recall the night she'd fled Memphis with nothing but a frayed hope. 30 days might not seem like much in the eternal scheme of things, but it made a world of difference in her life and Noelle's. When Paul and Peter arrived seconds later, Leigh wondered if her itty-bitty dwelling might explode at the seams, but her ruminating came to an end when she spotted their grins. "What?" Leigh cheekily questioned, feeling more carefree than she had in a long while. "Peter here put a tidbit on his website about the rest of the reclaimed wood," Paul started. With a nudge, Peter playfully shoved his pops aside. "Stop stealing my thunder." Leigh and Mary shared a resigned look, one that said, "Boys will be boys," over the two men's antics. "Well, out with it then. What's got you two so riled up?" Mary prompted. "Sold every last linear foot of the flooring," Peter crowed. "Got 2 weeks to deliver it to Asheville, so if Leigh here wants to give me a hand with the rest of it, she should make enough to cover the cost of adding the propane lighting and heating to this place." Flabbergasted, Leigh brought a palm to her cheek. Well,
This is unreal." "God's as real as can be, darling. Make no mistake about it," Mary said. "He'll keep you from harm, Leigh. He'll watch over your life if you give him a chance."
Chapter 11. The soft luminance of the propane fireplace cast a comforting glow over the darkened room, and Leigh burrowed under the heavy blue paisley patchwork quilt she'd purchased that afternoon. Her roughened hands carried the evidence of the hard work needed to complete Peter's order, but the payoff was a boon to her stilted self-worth. She'd done it. Numerous hours spent in the workshop working alongside the Whitaker men cemented Leigh's place as an independent woman, at least in her mind. The pieces of her fractured life were coming together, but as Leigh watched the shadows flicker across the ceiling, her heart wrenched. Doubts thwarted whatever peace she might have earned, and panic settled in her bones. Her husband, David, would know her exact location as soon as he was served with divorce papers, and that thought terrified Leigh. Would he come for them? Would he make good on his previous threats? Rolling away from her daughter's warm form, Leigh sat up on the side of the platform bed. Several small comforts, like an actual mattress, gave Leigh reasons to celebrate each tiny victory, but fear still lurked in the hidden recesses of her mind. Reaching into the built-in bookcase that ran around two sides of the bed, Leigh found the Bible Mary provided weeks earlier. Unable to decipher the archaic language, Leigh ignored it for the most part, at least until Mary took time to explain bits and pieces. Opening the book to a passage the older woman marked for her, Leigh reread the words and considered Mary's explanation again. "God's love is more than a warm, fuzzy feeling," the older woman said over supper the previous night. "It's a powerful force. It protects us, comforts us, builds us up when we're weak." Leigh understood weakness, but she couldn't fathom such love. At least, it hadn't made sense until Mary explained it in relation to a mother's love and protective nature. "How many times did you put yourself between that man and the little miss?" Mary had questioned as they washed dishes that night. "When your baby girl ran to you for protection, you surrounded her like a shield, didn't you?" Shivers racked Leigh's body when she recalled how many blows she'd taken while wrapped around Noelle's body. Then Mary's words came back to her. "God does the same for his children. You put that image in your mind, Leigh. Remember it whenever fear comes to call." The verses Mary highlighted in Psalm 5 said essentially the same thing. "You bless the godly," Leigh softly whispered. "You surround them with your shield of love." Godly? Leigh's mind questioned. She certainly couldn't qualify for that designation. Who could? Unable to sit still, Leigh began to pace the navy blue rug's length, the donated carpet with its white trellis design that started the whole idea of turning a yard barn into a home. She paused in the middle of the space and looked up into the rafters as Leigh took stock. That first night in the shed flitted back into her mind's eye, and Leigh cringed. Borrowed clothes. Bodies huddled into a ball of blankets on the hard floor like a litter of stray kittens. An ache in her empty stomach, then hunger stolen by anxiety. Now, her toes were toasty warm inside a pair of Sherpa-lined socks, a housewarming gift from the pastor's wife. While meager, their wardrobe fit their frames and the season, a situation aptly demonstrated by the fuzzy pajama pants and thermal top Leigh wore. The Cracker Jack box Leigh called a kitchen was still a work in progress, but with the addition of a small propane refrigerator, it was more functional. Reminded of the 4 cobalt blue place settings Peter's ex-wife provided, Leigh considered the friendships that continued to spring up. The expensive Fiesta dinnerware was undoubtedly something she'd never expected to own, yet there it was, sitting on the open shelving Peter crafted for her. As Leigh returned to the bed, she sighed out a prayer of thanks for the thick mattress that welcomed her tired body. Mind drifting into the first vestiges of sleep, Leigh envisioned an enormous man standing guard at her side, ready to shield Leigh from any harm. And Leigh relaxed into the incredible sense of security it brought. Chapter 12. Flustered, Paul scratched at the back of his neck. Don't pay him any mind, he gently suggested to the timid woman. Peter had no call to take out his frustration on you. Eyes on her feet, Leigh acknowledged the older man's attempt at comfort, but refused to look up. Focus, her mind insisted. As a career choice, dismantling barns and old buildings never crossed Leigh's radar. Still, working in the fresh air and repurposing something that had long lost its value? There was an emotional symmetry in action, and it kept Leigh's overtaxed brain from the parade of dark thoughts that plagued her. Loosening another long piece of hand-milled lumber, Paul said, "Mind the nails," as they carefully backed the piece away from the structure. When the weathered piece of wood began to splinter and crack, Paul grumbled, "Not sure if we can salvage this one." Panic hit hard and swift. Leigh's throat convulsed, and her knees buckled. Why did that observation seem like a statement of damnation? "Hey there, take it easy. It's a long way down," Paul shouted as Leigh's ladder began to sway. Stiff-legged, Leigh ponderously made her way to the cold, hard ground where she dropped into a ball of misery. Bitter tears leaked onto her denim-clad legs as Leigh drew her knees up toward her chest. "You hurt?" Paul called in concern as he cautiously approached. As the seconds ticked by and the heaving sobs grew louder, the confounded man doffed his ball cap and nervously shifted from foot to foot. "Aw, corn nuts," he silently groused. "It's one of those damnable woman things," Paul's rattled mind confirmed. Early on in his marriage, Paul learned, the very hard way, that sometimes it was best just to sit down and shut up until the waterworks dried up. Her head snapped up when Leigh felt the first soft pat on her back. Shoving the loose strands of honey-blonde hair away from her face, Leigh chanced a peek at the stoic man beside her. "It ain't as bad as all that, is it?" Paul questioned. "I'm as worthless as that board," Leigh wailed. "What? No, that ain't what I said," the horrified fellow stammered. Sniffling, Leigh mourned. "You don't have to say it. It just is." Off kilter, Paul searched his mind. What in tarnation was he supposed to do with a weepy woman? Maybe we should call Mary?" Leigh brushed the flood of tears aside, but more took their place. She tried so diligently to put her life back together, to hold on to a shred of hope, to keep going for Noelle's sake. But there was nothing left inside her. Leigh was empty and unsalvageable. What would you do if this broken child was your daughter? A quiet voice whispered in Paul's head. Immediately, Paul wrapped an arm around Leigh's shaking shoulders, and just that quickly, it was imperative that the reserved man speak. "Ain't none of us worth much," Paul admitted. "At least not by our own right." Her first instinct was to shrug away the light embrace, but the sweet offer of comfort won Leigh's tenuous acceptance. "But there's a fellow who thought you were worth everything," Paul mused, his thoughts and speech slowly coalescing. "A king who left everything behind to rescue you, Leigh. He thought you were worth it. His whole kingdom in exchange for you." "That's just crazy," Leigh thought as she tipped her head into Paul's shoulder. The scent of a hard-working man should have been repulsive, but in that moment, Leigh relished the closeness. It was a first, the sense of solace that had nothing to do with sexual energy or masculine demands. "All he wants is your heart, girl." Leigh shuddered and whimpered. "There's nothing left of it." Chapter 13. Mary queued up a bookshelf stereo. "A CD?" Leigh mirthlessly chuckled. "I haven't seen one of these in years." "Oh, posh," Mary indignantly declared, her tone playful. "You kids and your gadgets. Now let me tell you about something called vinyl."
Then she waved away the banter. "Wait, here it is." Politely, Leigh focused on the lyrics like Mary asked. Paul's earlier conversation made more sense than the jumble of words that played in time to a lilting melody. "Ain't that just beautiful? A heart that let itself be broken every time until it healed mine?" Mary softly inquired. "Now that's a love you can believe in." Leigh nodded in respect of Mary's opinion, but Leigh's idea of love was jaded, skewed, demolished. Crippled trust shattered whatever might have been a valid response years earlier, before David's brand of love scarred her body and soul. The early November sunshine played hide-and-seek with the shadows that filtered through the evergreen canopy overhead, and Leigh's soft smile of delight with Noelle's antics faded when Peter appeared, ball cap firmly grasped in one hand. "I owe you an apology, Leigh. I was rude today, and it had nothing to do with you," he quietly advised. "Things this year, they've been mighty tough, and I got some bad news today that put me in a foul mood," the repentant fellow said. "Sorry to take it out on you." Surprise crawled across Leigh's features. A man who apologized was a novelty in her experience. I hope everything's okay now," she softly consoled. Peter's stoic veneer cracked. "Nah," he mumbled as he dropped onto the porch next to Leigh. "Just another rough patch to get through." "Hello, Mr. Peter," Noelle called as she scuffled past, the bouquet of brightly colored leaves she collected grasped tightly in one hand. "Hi there, little miss," Peter responded. "How are you doing today?" The tiny blonde twirled, arms outstretched. "I'm good," she exclaimed. "Do you want to find pretties with me?" "Pretties? Oh, leaves," the man chuckled. "Nah, I think I'll leave that to you, Elle. You're doing a real good job of it." When the little girl returned to the hunt, Peter settled into a comfortable silence. "Your folks? They're pretty amazing," Leigh quietly commented into the stillness. "No argument here." "I don't know what Elle and I would have done without their help, but I feel like I'm letting them down," the shy lady admitted. "It's, that God stuff means a lot to them, huh?" "That's an understatement if I ever heard one," Peter agreed. "I see how it makes them, I don't know, different, I guess. Still, most folks don't get quite so radical about it." "So you don't think it's real either? That kind of over-the-top religious experience?" Leigh tentatively probed. "That kind of love?" she whispered. Peter snorted. "I'm the wrong guy to ask about love," he grunted, holding up his hand and pointing to the bare ring finger. "That bad?" Leigh inquired, concern coloring her tone. "A decade of domesticity down the drain," Peter tried to kid. "So, what's your story?" Flinching, Leigh swallowed back the bitter taste in her mouth. Wrong man," she softly mumbled. "And no way out." Laying a light hand over Leigh's trembling one, Peter gently reminded, "Hey, that's not true. You're here now, and things will get better with time." "You really think so?" came the feeble reply. And he was caught, because in all honesty, Peter had no idea if anything would ever get any better, not in his life or anyone else's. Chapter 14. The creak of the wind and the slap of a branch against the cabin startled Leigh awake, and when the empty space beside her registered, Leigh sat bolt upright in bed. "Elle!" she shouted in fear as she scrambled from under the covers. Bone-chilling terror streaked up and down Leigh's spine as she quickly pulled on her outerwear while praying to whatever deity would listen. "Mama?" the child sleepily called from the loft.
Leigh crumpled into the deep-cushioned chair borrowed from Paul's man cave. Her head fell into her hand as she melted in relief. Leigh'd forgotten. It was Noelle's first night in her bedroom.
"It's okay, baby. Go back to sleep," she tenderly answered. "Mama just had a bad dream."
The rustling of covers and a soft sigh heralded the girl's safe return to undisturbed slumber, and Leigh let her tears fall.
"What am I doing?" she whispered to the darkness. "How can I live like this, God? Always afraid and alone and worried. What could you possibly do to make this any better?"
The whoosh of a gentle breeze slipped past the tiny dwelling, a soft, soothing murmur in its breath. Hopeful anticipation swayed in the shadows as firelight flickered and a reassuring presence warmed the room. Leigh curled into the boxy chair as the midnight hour passed in a haze of jumbled thoughts and whispered prayers.
"Can you hear me, God? Can you see how much I hurt? Why didn't you protect me? What did I ever do to deserve any of this?"
her heart fiercely cried. Exhausted by the tidal wave of emotion, Leigh felt compelled to write.
"I do not know what I did to deserve such hatred and contempt from David. There isn't anything I can think of that justifies the suffering. But you allowed it, God, and I want to know why. What good could come from angry words or hard fists? If I'm that worthless and unlovable to a mere man, how could I possibly think I'm worthy of your time or energy, your affection? I don't have any answers, only questions. I don't have any hope, only doubt. Where are you, God, when I hurt so bad that I can't breathe?"
Moisture blurred Leigh's eyes and dropped to the page. There was so much she didn't understand.
"What brought me to this place? And who are these people? Why would they take in a stranger and treat her like a daughter, a friend? Why do they insist that you are the answer? Are you there, God? Can you hear me? Please, please help me."
Leigh tore off the piece of notebook paper and folded it up. Then she trundled back to the bed and lifted the Bible from the built-in bookcase. Opening the book, Leigh randomly dropped the angry letter inside, but several verses caught her eye.
"Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest,"
she softly read to the quiet room.
"I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." "Please, God," she whispered, "if you love me at all, tell me what to do."
Dropping the Bible on the bed, Leigh flopped backward, her arms stretched wide.
"Where are you?"
Silence reigned. Leigh didn't know why she'd expected anything else. Then her eyes landed on the book she'd haphazardly flung aside. "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." The passage in Jeremiah read. Chapter 15. Thanksgiving preparations were well underway in the Whitaker home, but more meaningful work was afoot in the country kitchen. Her guest's plea pierced Mary's heart.
"It's simple, darling,"
she softly answered as she rolled out the pie crust.
"It's more like falling in love than something to believe in. You spend time getting to know each other, reading and writing love letters, you know?"
Leigh wrinkled her brow in confusion.
"Love letters? To God?"
A chuckle escaped as Mary bent to put the first of her holiday confections in the oven.
"Maybe that sounds simplistic, but nothing could be more true. First and foremost, the relationship between you and God is about forgiveness. But next to that, it's about building a love affair that sees you through every dark day and joyous moment that life throws at you."
The warm scent of spices in the air tickled Leigh's nose.
"Happy times are generally outside of my experience. I didn't have this kind of life before I met you and your family," she reminded. "And honestly, it seems kind of surreal to believe something like this is possible for me."
Leigh sighed.
"Oh, it's possible," Mary encouraged with a wink. "Possible, and just waiting for you to decide if you want that kind of love in your life."
As they worked together that afternoon, Mary and Leigh explored the untapped well of God's goodness. And when Leigh returned to her tiny home that evening, she hunted out the verses Mary shared earlier in the day. After Noelle was safely settled into the cozy loft for the night, Leigh returned to the comfy chair by the fireplace.
"Well, here I am," she whispered to the universe. "Now what?"
The notebook she'd used the night before was still rested on the side table, and Leigh pulled it forward. For weeks, she'd journaled about the torment that kept her awake at night.
"Oh, what the heck," she grumbled and flipped to a clean page. "I'm sitting here, waiting for you to show up as some ghostly specter or flash of lightning, but apparently that's not how this works. Mary showed me the love letters you wrote to me, and I gotta say, I don't understand much of what you've written. Although there's one spot that made me feel better. Something about how you heal the broken-hearted and bind up their wounds. That would have been nice to know before David started slapping me around. But the letter I like the best so far is the one that says you're on my side. I could use a friend. Someone who won't look at me like I'm a freak because I stayed with a man who hurt me. I want someone to hold me when I'm sad and cheer for me when I finally do something right. Are you that guy? Or is it too weird to think of God like that? I don't know how it's possible for you to love someone like me. I really don't. But Paul and Mary assure me that all I need to do is put my trust in you. They told me your love never ceases and that your mercies never end. Is that true? I hope so, because I don't know where else to turn. God, I'm so scared. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm asking anyway. Would you take a chance on a worthless woman like me? Did you mean it when you said nothing could ever separate me from your love? I want to believe that. I want to know that I'm that important to someone. Anyone. There's nothing much left of me anymore, God. Just a lot of regrets. But if you want me, really want me, I'll give you my heart. It's battered and bruised, but it's yours if you want it. Love, Leigh.
Chapter 16. Thanksgiving dawned bright and cool, the crisp air invigorating as Leigh and Noelle trudged along the path to the Whitaker house.
"Are you happy, Mama?"
the chipper little girl asked. Leigh cocked her head and thought about it for a moment. She felt several tons lighter than she had the night before, and Leigh considered the hours of dreamless sleep that left her refreshed. A strange realization took shape. She was happy.
"I guess I am,"
Leigh answered in startled recognition of that elusive feeling. Noelle skipped ahead, then circled back.
"I thought so," the preschooler crowed. "You got the same happy face Meemaw Mary gets when she's singing."
Puzzled, Leigh quirked an eyebrow.
"You know,"
the cheerful child cajoled.
"she just gets all shiny."
"Shiny, huh?" the confused mother questioned.
"Yep, shiny and happy, just like Meemaw when she sings Jesus Loves Me."
Her pace slowed, and Leigh turned a dazed look on the little girl. "Hurry up, you two," Peter yelled from the back porch. "Ma's got biscuits and gravy for us this morning, and I need a cup of joe." Noelle bounded up the steps and plopped onto the hay bale next to Peter. With the accompanying dried corn stalks, gourds, and pumpkins, the festive setup reminded Leigh of a photographer's backdrop.
"Who's Joe?" the demanding pixie queried. "Tell him to put jam on my biscuits. I don't like the sloppy stuff."
Peter stifled a laugh and playfully tugged on Noelle's corn silk braid. "Sure thing, little miss, but you better head inside and let Meemaw and Peepaw know." The child bolted away, calling,
"Meemaw, don't put yucky things on my biscuits."
Peter grinned at Leigh and held out a hand. "Want to watch the Thanksgiving Day parade later? It's a tradition around here." Leigh knew very little about traditions. Her birth family was beyond dysfunctional, and she never picked up the habits of the foster families she'd spent time with during childhood.
In her own home, the holidays were more often holler days, as changes to routine seemed to provoke David's temper more than usual. Bravely, Leigh took the proffered hand. "You could probably talk me into it," she answered with a small smile, still amazed by the freedom she felt. "But I've got to catch Elle before she gets too much of that strawberry jam in her system. Otherwise, she'll be bouncing around like a jackrabbit." "Ah, right. Probably better catch Ma before she loads Elle up with chocolate milk and lets her loose on the platter of goodies. Those apple turnovers and the banana bread will have the little miss hopping." "To the rescue, then." Leigh grinned, joy and a sense of belonging fueling her lively response. As she looked around the loaded dining room table that afternoon, Leigh struggled to identify the strange sense of calm that settled over her. When she recognized the unusual peace for what it was, Leigh was astonished. Contentment? That's what this feeling is? She mutely wondered. Later, elbows deep in dishwater, Leigh tried to explain. "I finally feel like I belong somewhere," she stammered as Mary bustled around. "Belong to someone." The older woman nodded in agreement. "What'd I tell you, darling? It's more like losing your heart than giving allegiance." "But is it real?" Leigh quietly questioned. "What's your heart say?" Mary prompted. Leigh shrugged. "I don't know. It's just so strange to feel anything but fear. I can finally breathe." She sighed. "There's this quiet, I guess you'd call it, where all the chaos used to be." Mary drew up alongside the amazed young woman and hip-checked her. "That's the Spirit of God moving into your life. He'll satisfy every longing and give you the desires of your heart. You just wait and see, Leigh. God is good, and your day is coming." Afterward. If you've spent any time on the hard side of another's temper, then you likely relate to Leigh's hypervigilance and fear. And maybe you wonder if something elusive as peace and security is possible. After all, this is just another bit of fiction, right? Perhaps Leigh is an imaginary character, but her journey to joy is as real as the bruises that cover your body and soul. And let me assure you, you have intrinsic value to the God who created you. You are so fervently, abundantly loved, friend. For Leigh, the recognition of God's goodness came after she handed over all her cares in a powerful display of trust. Trust that did not come easily for someone maliciously betrayed by the folks in her past. Are you ready to trust yourself to the compassionate mercy of God? Do you want to claim the serenity and hope that only He can provide? As Mary would say, it really is as easy as falling in love, darling. When you place your faith in God, He asks you to admit your need for His presence in your life. And I'm sure that step is easy as you consider the alternatives. Who else can you fully rely on to meet you in the depths of your pain? There is only one true friend, one true love that will satisfy that hungry longing in your heart. And His name is Jesus, the Son of God. When you believe that He sacrificed Himself in your place so you could experience the fullness of His love, that's when genuine miracles happen. That's when peace of mind restores your hope and joy. Redemption is real, and the only requirement is that you accept it as something you cannot earn. Like Leigh, you can claim the free gift of renewed hope and eternal life by confessing your need for restoration. Then state your desire to begin a personal relationship with God. Elaborate prayers are not what God requires. He just wants to hear your heart speak to Him as a well-loved child would with their father. Give Him all your cares, ask for His forgiveness, and accept the beautiful gift of new life, eternal life, found only in Jesus. One more thing. God's physical presence can be felt in the people He sends to help you safely on the way. And the gifts of contentment, joy, and acceptance are things that further confirm His presence in your life. Now rejoice and be glad. Let the old fall away and look toward your future with hope. God has a remarkable plan for your life, friend,
and I promise He will never let you down. If you've chosen to accept the gift of a new beginning with Jesus, I would love to hear your story. And if there are questions that still plague your heart, please feel free to contact me via email at author@michelepollockdalton.com. That's MicheLePollockDalton. This story, in all of its digital forms, will always remain free for you to share. Links can be found on my website at michelepollockdalton.com. As a new child of God, you will want to find people who will nurture you and help you grow in your daily relationship with God. Cornerstone Church in San Antonio, Texas, has a spectacular online ministry that will be a cherished resource as you move forward with your new life. Find them at www.sacornerstone.org. Other online ministries you may want to investigate can be found at www.jdfarag.org and www.harvest.org. God bless. This has been Spirit of Christmas, Love Leigh. Hope for the Holiday Series, Book 1. Written by Michele Pollock Dalton. Narrated by Rick Barr. Copyright 2020 by Michele Pollock Dalton. Production copyright by Michele Pollock Dalton.